please help me in welcoming the man whose own vision for the future is so inspiring, an army is rising up around him, and I very much include myself in that.
The author of Together is Better, Start with Why, and Leaders Eat Last, the incomparable Sinek.
What a pleasure it is to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I haunted your Twitter feed.
Okay.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
And I wanted to start with something that you put on there. And you said, we can learn about our future from our past because regardless of technology or the speed of innovation, people are still people.
True.
The thing that I really found interesting is you seem to understand people. What are some key traits about just humans that every leader should know?
Well, I think one of the things that we forget is that we are a legacy machine working in a very different environment than we were designed for, you know? Our species sort of started showing up about 50,000 years ago. There were other hominid species that existed at the time. They died off, we survived. And it was those evolutionary traits that gave us the opportunity to outlive our competition, but also survive and thrive, even as the environment around us changed. We lived in populations that were never bigger than about 150 people for 40,000 of the 50,000 years that we've lived on this planet. It's only the past 10,000 years with farming that we've been living in populations that were larger than that. In other words, we're not made for this, which means all the rules of being human are exactly the same as they used to be when we were living in populations of about 150. And so if you can understand those things, you really understand what works and what doesn't work, regardless of the conditions. The fact of the matter is we are social animals, and we respond to the environments we're in, always. Our very survival depends on our ability to cooperate and trust with the people that we live or work with, right? You can take a good person and put them in a bad environment, and that person will do bad things. You can take a person who maybe the group doesn't trust, maybe they've even performed bad acts. You put them in a good environment, and they're capable of turning their lives around and becoming remarkable members of society. In other words, it's not the person, it's the environment. Leaders are responsible for that environment, and I think that leaders forget that. Leaders think that they're responsible for the results. There's not a leader on the planet that is responsible for the results. A leader is responsible for the people who are responsible for the results. And if you take care of that, take care of the people, take care of the environment, things go just fine. You know, we're obsessed with this idea of like getting the right people on the bus, you know, as if it's this game that you just sort of keep changing people out, you know, some sort of mix and match or something. But we never ask which bus and who's driving the bus. Right. You know, because the bus matters. You know? So I'm more obsessed with what happens to people when they come together in protected or unprotected environments and how we respond to those environments.
Yeah, that was a key insight for me. Like you say that you recursively ask why until you get to the point where you can't go backwards anymore. And that to me is one of those moments. Like when you understand that humans just by their nature, they react to their environment, all of a sudden it becomes pretty critical to think about the bus, right? Not only who's on the bus, but what is the bus, what's that environment? So I get it from a leadership perspective when you have rank, which you do a very good job of delineating between a leader and rank. Help people understand how if you don't have rank, how you could still be a leader for change in an environment that needs change.
So, as you said, leadership has nothing to do with rank, right? Leadership is a responsibility. As you gain rank, you may have more responsibility over the lives of more people, but it doesn't change the nature of leadership. I know many, many people who sit at the highest levels of organizations who are not leaders. They have authority, and we do as they tell us because they have authority over us, but we wouldn't follow them. And yet I know many people who've made a choice, who have no rank, but they've made a choice to look after the person to the left of them and look after the person to the right of them. And we would follow them anywhere. And that's what leadership is. It's the responsibility to take care of the people around us, the people with whom we work. And leadership is a practice like any other. It is a skill that can be learned. And that means it requires practice. You don't just suddenly get a promotion, you're now in a management position and you're a leader, right? That's not how it works. If only, right? If only, I know. The reality is we have to learn it and we have to practice it and we have to get good at it, which is what the junior ranks are for. So even if you don't have the ability to make decisions that will impact the entire organization, you do have the ability to make decisions that will impact the life of another human being, how they feel about their own jobs, how well their responsibility goes, how easily they can get work done, how supported they feel if they make a mistake. Do they feel that they can turn to you and ask you for help? That's all within your control. It's the same thing as being in a relationship or being a friend. Being a good friend, means that our friends can rely on us, they can trust us, they can turn to us. There's no difference. It's human beings, it's human relationships. At the end of the day, becoming a leader is about a transition. And everybody has to go through it if you want to become a leader. And as an aside, I will say, leadership is like parenting in the sense that everybody has the capacity to be a parent. Right. That doesn't mean everybody wants to be a parent, and that doesn't mean everybody should be a parent. Leadership is the same. Everyone has the capacity to be a leader. It doesn't mean everybody wants to be a leader, and it doesn't mean everybody should be a leader. Sure. And the reason is it comes with massive, massive responsibility. Sometimes people just don't want it. It's a lifestyle they choose not to have, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But if someone chooses that is a lifestyle they would like to have, they would like to become a leader, then they have to acknowledge that they will or need to go through a transition. When we're very, very junior, the only thing we have to do is be good at our jobs. That's it, right? Some people go get advanced degrees in how to do their jobs, engineers or accountants. And if you're good at your job, they'll promote you. And eventually you'll get promoted to a position where you're now responsible for the people who do the job you used to do, but nobody teaches us how to do that. And we just expect them to be good at leadership, right? It's as if we put somebody in front of a machine and demanded results, but never showed them how to use the machine. And so the reason we get managers, the reason we get micromanagers, the reason we get bad leaders is because nobody showed them how to do the job of leadership, for one. And two, they can't help themselves. Of course they're going to tell you to do it their way because they actually do know how to do it better than you, because that's what got them the promotion in the first place. Right. And the transition we have to make is that we are no longer responsible for the job. As I said before, we now become responsible for the people who are responsible for the job, right? There's not a manager around who's responsible for the results. We're responsible for the people who are responsible for the results. I love talking to CEOs, and I'm like, what's your priority? They say, my priority is my customer. I'm like, you haven't talked to a customer in 10 years. You have no impact on a customer at all. Right. What you can do is screw with someone's life who will then impact your customer, or support someone who will then impact your customer.
Such
right?
Powerful.
Leaders are responsible for the people, who are responsible for the people, who are responsible for the people, who are responsible for the customer. Get that chain right. That is the chain of command. Get that chain right, and everything goes just fine. Get that chain wrong, and then the people who are touching the customer, inventing the product, selling the product, figuring out ways how to build the company, manage the numbers, manage the processes, manage the operations. In other words, all the heavy lifting. Right. Get that chain wrong, and those people will spend more time protecting themselves from you than doing their job. Yeah. Right? Any company, for example, where it is standard practice in that company for employees to feel the need to send a CYA email after every decision they make, right, is a sign that they're taking time and energy out of their job, away from advancing the company's mission in order to protect themselves from their own company. That's what that is. Any company where it is standard practice for people to feel the need to keep a folder of all the good things they've done in their careers just in case they need it, is a sign that they're taking time and energy out of their day away from doing their job in order to protect themselves from their own leaders. That's what that is. Those are signs of bad leadership. Politics, gossip. All of these things are people acting out of self-interest. That's what politics and gossip is. Right? In well-led organizations, you tend to find very little politics and very little gossip, because we're not competing at that level. We're now working together to compete at a much higher level. I'll tell you one quick story. It's a true story that captures it just so perfectly. I was staying at the Four Seasons in Las Vegas, which is a wonderful hotel. And the service there is really great. The reason it's such a great hotel is because of the people who work there. And I had an experience with a young man by the name of Noah. And Noah's a barista in the coffee shop that they have just there in the lobby. And I was buying a cup of coffee, and Noah was charming and funny and engaging. And I think I gave 100% tip. I think my $5 coffee, I think I gave a $5 tip. I mean, this guy was great. I loved talking to him. He was a joy. And I asked him, do you like your job? He said to me, I love my job, without skipping a beat.
Wow.
And I asked, what is it that the Four Seasons is doing that you love your job so much? He says, without skipping a beat, he says, throughout the day, managers will walk past and ask how I'm doing and if there's anything that I need. He said, not just my manager, any manager.
Wow.
He says, I feel supported here. He says, quote, I can be myself, right? Then, it's magic. And then he says to me, I also work at Caesar's Palace. And there, the managers go around to make sure that we're doing everything right and catch us if we do something wrong. He says, when I go to work at Caesar's Palace, I keep my head just under the radar because I don't want to get in trouble. He says, I just want to get through the day and make a paycheck. Right?
Wow.
Same person.
Right.
The experience that I have at the Four Seasons will be diametrically opposite to the experience that I have at Caesar's Palace, not because of Noah, but because of Noah's leadership.
Right.
And the joke is, if I were to go talk to the managers over at Caesar's Palace and say, you know it's you, they'll say, but you don't understand, we cannot get good work out of our people. Look, no matter how hard we try and how hard we push them, they just don't, so we either have to replace them or push them harder. No. We respond to the environments we're in. Get the environment right, you get the right behavior. Get the environment wrong, you get the wrong behavior. If that is what is happening, it is because of leadership, not because of the people.
Yeah, there was a really famous cartoon back in the 80s, The Beatings Will Continue Until the Morale Improves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always thought that was hilarious because it's so terrifyingly accurate.
And astonishingly, look, I'm embarrassed that I have a career. You know, I talk about things like trust and cooperation. Why is there demand for my work, you know? But the fact that there is, I'll take it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
But what's really sort of abominable is that this is not a new idea. Like, there are books galore and speeches galore and articles galore about what leadership is. You know, and we all kind of say the same thing from a different angle, so you can pick your flavor, whichever message resonates most with you, and yet people don't do it. What's the hang up? And so I get this question a lot, which is, what are the most important characteristics about being a leader? You know, vision, charisma, you know? I know some spectacular leaders who don't have big Steve Jobsian visions. They're just not visionary, you know? And I know some spectacular leaders who really don't have a lot of charisma. They kind of just shuffle around and you're like, that's the guy, that's the guy, right? And they're spectacular and people will give blood, sweat, and tears for these people. The one thing I am comfortable saying that all effective leaders must have is courage, because it is hard. It is hard to stand up against outside pressure. It is hard to stand up to an external constituency who's pushing you to do something for their short-term gain, to do the right thing for your people. It is hard. It is thankless. It is lonely. Sometimes you get fired. Sometimes you get in trouble. Sometimes you'll lose your job and the next guy will get all the credit. It's all true. And the courage to do the right thing in the face of overwhelming pressure, only the best leaders have that courage. Only the best leaders. And here's the folly. Courage is not some deep internal fortitude. You don't dig down deep and find the courage, right? It just doesn't exist. Courage is external. Our courage comes from the support we feel from others. In other words, when you feel that someone has your back, when you know that the day that you admit you can't do it, someone will be there and say, I got you. You can do this. That's what gives you the courage to do the difficult thing. It's not going off to an ashram by yourself somewhere for 4 weeks and coming back and finding the courage. It's not what happens. It's the relationships that we foster. It's the people around us who love us and care about us and believe in us. And when we have those relationships, we will find the courage to do the right thing. And when you act with courage, that in turn will inspire those in your organization to also act with courage. In other words, it's still an external thing. That's what inspiration is, right? I'm inspired to follow your example. But those relationships that we foster over the course of a lifetime will not only make us into the leaders we need to be and hope we can be, but they'll often save your life. They'll save you from depression, they'll save you from giving up, they'll save you from any matter of negative feelings about your own capabilities, your own future. When someone just says, I love you, and I will follow you no matter what.
I want to talk about that for a second. Why do you think that something so innate, so deeply ingrained in us as love is so, like just yesterday, I can't believe this is true, this is actually true, I'm not making this up. Just yesterday, this will mean something to you guys, I looked Ron Penna in his eyes and I said, I love you. And I said it like 100%, is my business partner, I said it 100% sincerely. It was just one of those moments where you wanna connect and remember, but that's so weird, like I don't do that often. And it's so interesting that it becomes out of context,
Sure.
maybe is the best way to say it, because like at home with my wife, it's so easy and I love to embody it and I love to feel it and it makes me feel awesome. But then I come into the office and there's something about the context that makes it weird.
Yes, two perspectives. One is this is what vulnerability is, right? Being vulnerable doesn't mean crying. Being vulnerable means willing to admit you made a mistake. Being vulnerable is the willingness to say, I need help. Being vulnerable is the willingness to express the feelings you have towards someone without fear of what other people may think of you by making that expression. And most people, especially if they don't have a trusting environment or a strong corporate culture, most people don't want to feel vulnerable. It's dangerous to feel vulnerable. If you admit you made a mistake or you don't know what you're doing, you've been promoted into a job that you have no clue or no business being in that job, lying, hiding, and faking is a much better option, right? But for the fact that it's more stressful and ultimately the results will falter, right? It's counterintuitive. But that's what a strong environment means. It means I can be vulnerable. So the fact that you can say that out loud means that there's a loving, trusting culture here that is okay with you being vulnerable. Nobody's thinking, oh my God, this company's going downhill, this guy's nuts. He's blubbering all over the place, you know? That's not what people are thinking. I mean, some people are probably thinking it. But generally, that's not what people are thinking. If anything, people are going, cool. And that then inspires them to feel that they can also express vulnerability, like admit a mistake, like say they screwed up, like say they need help, that say, they want to offer help to someone and not fear that either. So that's one perspective. The other reason why stuff that I talk about or that you're talking about now is so often ignored is just because it's hard to measure. How do you measure leadership?